Pessoal, não vamos esquecer de acionar o sino.
Hello, good afternoon. We are going to start. Those who will arrive, we can let them in so they can join us today. It is again a great pleasure to be here with you today to host a wonderful panel of specialists about Latin America and geopolitics. I'm not going to extend myself, but we have today this first panel, and then we have a second panel about European Union and Mercosur. And tomorrow I would like to invite you to come to a more artistic and linguistic part of the seminars, which is Latin American literature. And then we are going to watch a movie and discuss movies and series from Latin America that were worth to watch. So you don't have to miss that, because Silvia is going to be here as well. And we are going to have also Kiko, Professor Francisco, who is in SP Cine in Sao Paulo, and he's a specialist in audiovisual in Brazil, the audiovisual industry in Brazil, and he's going to share the regional series and movies. In one of the movies we are going to watch is La Historia Oficial, the official story. And that is going to be at FAAP Cinema tomorrow at 2 p.m., so you are invited to come. And today, continue with our presentations. We have, as I mentioned before, geopolitics and security in Latin America, sensitive regional locations to pay attention. My goodness. And we have a lot, I think, right? And I know our speakers today, they are going to divide the presentation into geopolitics, democracy, and also some part of criminology, right? Without borders, you can say criminology without borders, because we have in common these serious problems and these challenges in Latin America, not just here, all over the world, but especially here in the region of Latin America. I am Lourdes Silva, by the way. I'm the coordinator of the program and the director of the International Office at FAAP. Okay? I'm going to introduce Commander Robinson Farinazo. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure. He's the Marine Corps YouTube. He has a YouTube channel. So you can go on YouTube and you can watch his channel, which is very, very interesting. It's called Arte da Guerra, the art of war. And he's also the writer of the book As Leis do Sucesso dos Políticos de Guerra, Laws of Success for War Politicians. My goodness. I wanted to read that, Commander. I need that book. Maybe you can give me one. Speak on the microphone, because we have people on YouTube, right? So they can hear us very well. Okay. And then we have lawyer and Professor Rodrigo Arruda. It's very pleasure to have you here today, Professor Rodrigo.
The pleasure is all mine.
And Professor Rodrigo, I found it very interesting, because Professor Rodrigo, besides having a master's degree in law from PUC, is the Pontifical Catholic University of Sao Paulo, he has a postgraduate degree in intelligence and state security from Foreign Intelligence Academy of the Russian Federation. My goodness. So I think he's the right person to talk about security as well. So welcome. And then we have our friend journalist Silvia Colombo. She is specialized in Latin America, and she's a columnist of Folha de Sao Paulo. And she also wrote a book, O Ano da Cólera, The Year of Cholera, published by Rocco, which explores the protests in Latin America in 1919. Okay? Yes, 1919. Estou falando 2019. It's the same. Okay. So we are going to start with Commander Robinson Farinazo. Please pick up the microphone, Commander, and the floor is yours. If you want to stand up, it's possible as well. If you want to get seated, it's okay. So
I prefer stand up.
And we have some presentation as well, right?
Okay.
So, yes. Go ahead, and I will sit down here and give you the microphone.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to me to talk to you today. Well, our lecture is about the absence of sovereignty and the downfall of democracy. I believe it's very hard to maintain a democracy society when a lot of stranger states make interventions over military, over institute, over all the beliefs of the society. It's the greatest problem of Latin America. We are not free. We are not free. Our democracy is manipulated by great powers. I believe that the moral doctrine is always over our heads. So today I will make a presentation that will show to you that the democracy in Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and other countries is always, all the time, over menace from other countries. Well, aqui, de qual ponto? Ah, tá. You know, now you hear a statement about the planning in Washington to overthrow President Getúlio Vargas in 1945, and what interests were behind this coup. This video is in the Brazilian Senate. What you hear in this video, so I apologize for you that the video is in Portuguese. I could not make the translation. But basically, what he says at the overthrow of Getúlio Vargas in 1945 was planned in Washington, D.C. Let's see the video. O que faz aqui? Ah, tá.
Para fazer uma visita aos Estados Unidos, onde queriam agradecer a ele pelas cirurgias que ele tinha feito em oficiais americanos, até pela vida de oficiais americanos que ele salvou. E no fim dessa visita, ele foi, houve um almoço em Wall Street, e quando terminou o almoço, o anfitrião, um empresário americano, pode ser até que fosse um dos irmãos Rockefeller, mas o Lutero, quando me contou isso, não tinha certeza. Saiu com ele, a pretexto de levá-lo até o carro, e no meio do caminho disse: olha aqui, eu queria ter uma conversa sem testemunhas com o senhor. Para lhe avisar o seguinte: o presidente Roosevelt está gravemente doente, está desenganado, tem poucas semanas de vida. Eu quero que o senhor avise ao seu pai que assim que o Roosevelt for morrer, o seu pai vai ser deposto. Porque grandes interesses econômicos aqui não concordam com as coisas que ele fez. Com a construção de Volta Redonda, ele está suprimindo exportações de aço que os Estados Unidos faziam para o Brasil. Mas pior do que isso, ele vai concorrer com o aço americano em outros mercados. Eles nunca engoliram isso.
Chegamos a ser o 6º maior produtor de aço do mundo depois. É evidente que isso conflita com os interesses econômicos americanos.
O Brasil perseguiu, sob diversos regimes políticos, um projeto chamado Nacional Desenvolvimentista.
It's very sad. Thank you. It's very sad, but it's the true history, not the things that we read in the books. Well, at the same time, we had the position of Vargas. We also witnessed the overthrow of Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala, and Juan Domingo Perón in Argentina, and Mohamed Mossadegh in Iran, in a space of few years, 2 or 3 years.
O Lutero foi convidado.
Well, this is the overthrow of Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala. You see, I will speak later, that there is a roadmap, a script in all these overthrows, all these depositions they follow a script. It's the same script written 80 years ago and is working until now. Well, here you see the mob. Basically, what's the script to overthrow a president or every kind of leader? You gather a mob. You say to the mob that the government is corrupt, is incompetent, or anything, 20 cents, anything you want. So the mob goes to the city, they broke things, they put fire on houses, they hurt people, sometimes they kill people. They killed people in Ukraine in 2013. And the army has to intervene. And the army goes, intervene, and overthrow the government. Sometimes they kill the president. This is the roadmap for the coup. The exception to all this case was in Ukraine. You see the movie. What happened in Ukraine? You have a high functionary of the Department of State of United States, Victoria Nuland. She goes to Kiev, and they pressure the government of Viktor Yanukovych to sign, European press Yanukovych to sign a document where he promised not to use the army to repress the movement. So all the rebels in Kiev, they have all the liberty to make the overthrow of the government. And it was a bloody coup. More than 100 policemen were killed. It was not a Pacific revolution. It was not a velvet revolution. It was not a revolution for dignity. It was a revolution for natural resources. Well, you see here Mohammad Mossadegh, who was the prime minister of Iran in 1952. As all you know, Iran is over a huge reserve of oil. So the American and British, they want to explore that oil. Mossadegh nationalized the oil. So they make the very old map. The military, a mob, you see a mob. The military goes to the street. A lot of generals surrounded Mossadegh, and so as he was overthrown, and he died years later in his house. He was arrested in his house. So 27 years later, Iran goes to the same way through the Islamic revolution of Ayatollah Khomeini. So it never worked to overthrow Mossadegh. Later comes Khomeini, and the things get very worse to the United States. Ah, tá, desculpa. Volta mais umas duas. Volta. Volta mais uma. Ah, tá, agora pode ir para a próxima. Well, now we're going to see a sequence of strong images in Argentina when the Navy aircraft bombed and the Plaza of Mayo, and several people were killed in this bombing. It was a violent coup to overthrow the President Juan Domingo Perón. We must remember that American participation was very large, because even the American ambassador in Argentina participated in demonstration against Perón. Well, what was the case? You see Arbenz overthrown in Guatemala in 1954. You see Vargas suicide himself in that same year, You see Mossadegh was overthrown in 1953, and in 1955, Perón was overthrown. The coup in Argentina was the most violent as possible. The aviation of Argentine Navy, they bombed the Plaza of Mayo. A lot of people were killed. Pode passar, próximo. Olha isso. A lot of manifestants that were killed by the aviation. So the next, please. Here you see a woman that lost her legs. The next, please. Thank you. This is Ukraine. Thank you. Well, but all this government and these two, they have one characteristic. They were elected democratically. They go to the power through the vote. It was democracies. Not perfect democracy. I believe there is no perfect democracy. But all they were overthrown by the violence. So until now, I can ask for you, can the democracy, in not just Latin America, but other countries, survive against these menaces? It's a problem that you have to think all the days in your life. This phantom is everywhere. The violence to overthrow democratic governments. This is Ukraine. This is 2013. You see a tractor and you see the police. The rebels, they had a tractor. They have trenches. They have surgical centers. They have medics. And I ask for you, who was paying these resources? And I remember, Viktor Yanukovych, the president, was democratic elected. Okay? More than 100 policemen were killed by the rebels. It was not a Pacific revolution. Obrigado. More scenes of Ukraine. The next, please. Thank you, Doctor. Well, now you will see Victoria Nuland. She was a special envoy to Ukraine in the Maidan Revolution. So later you see the participation of Victoria Nuland in biolabs in Ukraine, and you see Victoria Nuland in Brazil. Doutor, pode passar esse vídeo para a gente?
When you're a high-ranking official talking about diplomatic efforts in Ukraine, the last thing you want to do is drop your guard.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, you know, the EU.
But that is exactly what reportedly happened between US Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland and US Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey Pyatt. The exchange has since surfaced online, including the crude swipe at the European Union. The audio clip of a woman and man, said to be Nuland and Pyatt, hears them discussing strategies to work with the three main opposition figures.
I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
In terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, you know, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. You know, I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
There is a suggestion for Nuland to contact Klitschko directly to play to his top dog sensibilities, while Nuland refers to getting the United Nations involved in a political solution. And that's where the unfortunate comment arises.
I'm obviously not going to comment on private diplomatic conversations, other than to say it was pretty impressive tradecraft. The audio was extremely clear. Hello, how are you? Good to see you. We're here from America. Would you like
revolution.
This
Was
was Newland
named.
and Pyatt visiting Independence Square in Kiev in December, handing out food to protesters and police. This latest episode is embarrassing for the US and allows Russia to argue that the opposition is being manipulated by Washington, something that Barack Obama has always denied. The clip was said to have been posted online by the Russian deputy PM, but that has not yet been confirmed.
Obrigado, doutor. Thank you. Well, as you saw, Victoria Nuland goes to the Ukraine in the midst of a revolution, and she talks to United States ambassador in Kiev that she knows that Viktor Yanukovych was going to be overthrown, and she has a candidate, but European has another candidate. And so the ambassador asked her, and the Union European. So she says a word that I cannot speak here, but you saw in the video. She says Union European. Okay? Well, 8 years later, in 2022, the war in Ukraine has begun. So you see the Marco Rubio as senator. Now he's a Secretary of State of the United States. And Marco Rubio called Victoria Nuland in the Senate. And he asks her about the situation of biolabs in Ukraine. So you see her answer. Por favor, doutor. Muito obrigado.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
What I think got some people fired up is when she said, we're worried that the Russians will get a hold of these facilities, because that implies that there's something in those facilities dangerous. So I don't know if you...
Pode passar o próximo. Bom, agora isso aqui já é no Brasil, tá? Em 2022. A mesma Victoria Nuland, né? Well, this is in Brazil 2022. You saw for the purpose of the revolution in Maidan. You see the biolabs later. So you will see now Victoria Nuland in Brazil 3 years ago. Please. Obrigado, doutor.
Em entrevista exclusiva à CNN, a subsecretária de Assuntos Políticos de Joe Biden disse que os Estados Unidos confiam no sistema eleitoral brasileiro. Victoria Nuland está em Brasília, onde participa de reuniões com o ministro das Relações Exteriores, Carlos França, e conversou com o repórter Matias Brotero. Vamos ouvir um trecho dessa conversa.
Matthias, we did talk about your upcoming elections today and the high-level dialogue, and the message that we conveyed is that the United States has real confidence in Brazil's electoral systems. You have one of the best in the hemisphere in terms of reliability, in terms of transparency, etc. So all Brazilians should have trust in the systems and should participate.
Well, just going to the end. Victoria Nuland is attached to the Democratic Party in the United States. She worked for Barack Obama and Joe Biden. You have to remember that the same Democratic Party make the military coup in Brazil in 1964. The same party. The president at the age was Lyndon Johnson. So we're going to the end. But well, I want to finish this lecture with a little piece of this movie, Getúlio. It's a magistral representation of Tony Ramos, and I want you hear what he said hours before he killed himself. Thank you.
Boa noite, senhores. Filha, eu estou há tantos anos no poder Quase nunca me pediram algo para o país. Sempre me pediram algo para alguém.
Professor Rodrigo.
Well, it's on? Microphone? Okay. So, well, first of all, I would thank you all for being here. I'm Rodrigo Arruda, and it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. I would like to thank you to teacher Rafael Bosic, who connected me to this institution, to teacher Silvia Burin, and teacher Lourdes of the internationalization. Well, today I will talk to you a little bit about black spots, culture, and challenges in Latin America. And after all, I would like just to make a disclaimer that it's not about specific politician theory. Okay, I will not use any of polarization things and this kind of stuff, because we know how the world's going today and how the Brazil are. So it's without any political bias. And first of all, I would like to tell you a very short story. I will talk to you, Sid, because I will operate the slides. But I have given lectures, classes, and training sessions at highly prestigious and renowned institutions in the country and abroad. But being here at FAAP today, it's a dream come true. And it's a dream come true because, paraphrasing Eric Common, when I was young, I came to FAAP to my first time, and we went to meet some other guests of my father's friend, my father's here today, to go to a theater to watch the play The Miser by Molière. And they were just here, and the friend provided us a tour. He was in the department of art or advertisement, something like that. So I thought that day, one day I will stood here. But God, or destiny, you use the word you prefer. I'm a Christian, so I use God. Took me far away. And I made the admission exam in Rio de Janeiro. I graduated. I did postgraduate degree, master degree, and etc., etc., etc. But that moment never came from my memories. And then my thoughts were to no longer about studying, but teaching or making lecture here. So it's my first time giving a lecture here. So that's why I tell you that. Well, the theme, right, sensitive locations to pay attention in Latam, we could have a good example and the challenges. Because of the time, I will not talk a lot of the good examples, like we have El Salvador, could solve the most part of the criminal problems and challenges. But I will talk about black spots, I will talk about Brazil specifically, and some parallel of another countries, but especially in Brazil. And the challenges we have of Latin America. Okay, here is just my curriculum, a short resume, but the teacher Lourdes told me, and you will not have to look for two of me, okay, one is enough. So I will start with Latin America scenario. Well, yesterday, when teacher Lourdes started this event, she tell us the word to describe Latin America, diversity. And diversity, because our countries are very different. So talk about Latin America, it's a challenge. We have here a map of the region is North America, Central America, and South America, right? Although some philosophers, some political scientists, researchers, and etc. consider the region as itself, it's one object of study. For me, in my view, perhaps because of my academic and philosophical line, I'm closer to teacher Eric Voegelin, to use the political science to study how the things do and works in reality, not what we should to do. And it's extremely challenging to consider Latin America as something unique, because we have something in common, of course, but all the countries have a lot of differences too. So, Latin America goes from Mexico to Uruguay, passing through, I said, North America, Central America, and South America. However, it do not represent the entire North America, the entire South America, and even the South America, right? We have, for example, French Guiana. We have the French ambassador here, Ambassador Levy. And French Guiana, it's subordinated to the French administration. So it's, and make a border to Brazil. Well, in my opinion, we could have a lecture to speak it further more information with Ambassador Levy. But in my opinion, unlike the European Union, which is de facto bloc with common policies, agendas, even the same money, yeah, the euro, the problems are in general very similar among its member countries. But in the context of Latin America, the challenges and the problems are very particular to each country, despite we have a lot of challenges of the region. Well, but so here it's this comparison, Latin America and Europe, the challenges of any blocks or any regions. And Hegel, when studied Latin America, told us Latin America has no history, it only has geography. In the 18th and something like that. Well, why Hegel told it? Because in that time, the nations, the Latin America countries, are very new. The independence wars or the independence treaties are very new, so they don't have time to have history. And of course, the Hegel's vision was criticize or reflection of Europe thought about America, and the way of the continent itself deals with his own history. It seems ironically to validate this claim. As long as it's not collective effort to rescue, preserve, and teach our history in the most part of the countries, especially in Brazil. I guess you will all remember of the museum burns in Rio de Janeiro a few years ago, and it's a clear example of how we preserve or not our history, how we deal with our history. Well, for example, we have here a photograph of São Paulo, our city, now, the city we all are here. It's a modern city, it's a beautiful city, and we can talk a lot about the architecture, the infrastructure of São Paulo. But here we have, for other side, Ouro Preto, a typical colonial city. And São Paulo, one day, had more constructions like Ouro Preto. But they rebuilt the city, and then rebuilt again the city. And our history, our culture, our values are lost in this transformation. So I will talk to you a little bit about culture and security. Yesterday, and I took a lot of notes of yesterday presentations, and one of notes I made here was about, I'm sorry, just, it's impossible to plow the ocean, right? Sylvia tell us yesterday. And it's a quotation, it's a feeling of you do every effort you could to have your country, to have your continent, to have your region developed brilliant, bright, cultural, advanced, but it's not enough. If we use another quotation I bring you here from Marquis of Pombal, he tells us, in Portugal, if we snot with the whip, nothing happens. And in Brazil, we have a lot of similar things about it with this quotation. And more, to bring you our scenario about culture and security, the criminal culture we have here in Brazil, unfortunately, I will bring you Ortega y Gasset. Ortega y Gasset was a Spanish philosopher, and the most famous book is of Ortega y Gasset, The Revolt of Masses. And the plot of the book, the major point, the thing he warning us, and if you could leave just one thing of my lecture, please remember of that. To the Middle Ages, to Renaissance, until the colonialism, the peasants, the simpler inhabitants, longed want to be like the nobles, like the court, like the kings. They long for and they inspired by elements that edify up culturally and spiritually. But with the advent of the mass media, especially radio and television, Ortega y Gasset started to write the book in 1929, but during the 40s and the 50s, with the popularization of television, he made some complementations. There was completely upheaval the values. They upheaval totally the values. You not try to be inspired by elements of edifying, and culturally and spiritually like the nobles, the court of the kings. No. Beliefs and desire and values was upheaval, and the elites want to look like the employees, like the people, and all those edifying elements was lost. Instead of valuing royalty, nobility, they began to value what is most popular. And okay, you can thought it's not a problem, but it's the seeds of our problems today. Today, the great reflection of it, it's the relationship between culture and crime, culture and problems of public security. Our time does not allow us to live into each country of the region, but if we have previously spoken about the challenges of finding important agendas for all Latin America, we almost all have certainly criminal or public security agenda. It's quite certain that the problems and challenges of public security in Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay, for example, it's not the same we have in Brazil, Bolivia, Mexico. In Brazil, in Mexico, for example, we have a lot of problems with drug dealers, with narcotraffic, yes, and the criminal organizations, robbery trucks, and this kind of stuff. But when we talk about sensitive places to pay attention, we need to pay attention in a positive way to El Salvador, and in the other hand, the black spots in Brazil, in Mexico, in a lot of countries of Latin America. Here, I bring you an exercise of culture and security. What our values are looking for today. Nowadays, the most part of people value the crime culture, right? The songs, their styles, and this kind of stuff, and forgot our past, our rich past, our history, our heroes, right? We have here two of our national heroes. I don't know if you know them, if you know what they do, what the importance of them for our community, for our country. But on the other side, our new supposed heroes, right? We have here Maria Quitéria, the first woman to serve in the Brazilian army, and José Bonifácio, the man responsible for the independence of Brazil, to produce all documents and plan the Brazil of the future, and was fight against slavery too. But nowadays, the most part of our people don't care for they prefer our new heroes about our artistic values, like singers, football, soccer players, and this kind of stuff, and to promote the crime culture, unfortunately. And now, the black spots. Black spots are areas with criminal domain and the state agents couldn't enter. The domain of some regions is not something very new. For example, if you search for the history of the footage of The Godfather, we will find the producers had to meet some agreement with the criminal chiefs, with the gangsters, the mobs, the mafia leaders, you use the word you prefer, to film in some places in New York was controlled and dominated for mobs. And they film following the rules and the permissions of the mobs gave to them. They use some gangsters into the movie. It's very interesting if you search for who are the actors. We have some real gangsters on the movie. But, by the way, we have a policy of security to the region. The cops could enter there. We have all the public services working in that regions. But the evolution of it's the black spots. Black spots, we have here a map of black spots. A friend of Brazilian Special Forces Army gave to me around the world, but we will concentrate in Latin America, especially in Brazil. And Brazil, the most part of black spots, unfortunately, are in Rio de Janeiro, especially in the favelas. And the Brazilian people talk, but favela is Brazilian culture. We are like the caramel dog, the Brazilian meme of caramel dog. No, we are a caramel dog. Favela, it's our culture. No, favela, it isn't our culture. Favela, it's a problem we need to solve. We need to have more houses and habitations with dignity for that people. And because favelas just are good for the criminals to domain that point. But instead of it, our state policies don't care about it. They have, we will made an urbanism action in favelas. We will made a safari in favelas. Yeah, it's a polemic we have some times ago when a YouTuber talk about it. In Africa they made a safari to see the animals, and here they use the same vehicles to watch favelas. And it's a problem for us. And we have the most part of black spots, like I said, in favelas, unfortunately, in Rio de Janeiro. Are areas completely controlled by the organized crime. And the organized crime do not just sell drugs. They control the community. If you live in there, you cannot buy nothing of your primary goods for outside of there. You need to buy to the criminal organizations' stores, let me say that, with highly priced. Sorry? So just let me give one thing more, please. Just one thing. And we have the ADPF 635, allegation of no compliance with a fundamental precept, with forbid the police to operate on the favelas. And what they made, the reason behind that for our Supreme Court is to not have fight and confrontation during the pandemic period. But the real consequence of it was the criminal organization's domain only growth more and more. And now we have just a photograph with anti-Iran law project and our culture right? Talking about Ayrton Senna, our last national hero, and our heroes of today. But I don't have time to do it, so if you want to make any questions, we'll do the Q&A here about it. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Teacher Lourdes. Thank you all, the FAAP. Thank you all of you. It's a pleasure, and God bless you. God bless Brazil.
Before passing the word to Silvia Colombo, I would like to highlight, and maybe I think it's the thought that Professor Rodrigo Arruda wanted to share with us, is we are not against the communities in Brazil. I think Professor Rodrigo is talking about the narco-traffic and the crime in the communities, right? So I think the pictures he showed and the slide he showed is nothing to do against the Brazilian people and the Brazilian people who live at the favelas dominated by the narco-traffic and crime. Those people who live in these called favelas, and we prefer to call it communities, they are as us. They work very hard, and they try to survive. I just wanted to make this a parenthesis, Professor Rodrigo, because I don't want they misunderstand the concept, right? And I pass the word to Silvia. Silvia, please.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you very much for all of you to be here. Thank you, Lourdes. Thank you, FAAP. Thank you, Rodrigo and Comandante Farinasso. It's a pleasure to be talking with you too. And I think what you have just pointed out, Lourdes, it's a good point to start what I prepared to talk, or I meant to talk about today. The presence of criminal organizations in communities such as Brazilian favelas or Argentina's villas miserias, or in the countryside of Colombia and Venezuela. It is very harmful, not only because of the big scene of the narco traffic and the criminality, but what these organizations do in these communities. They control daily life. They control the state, the presence of the state. Sometimes the state, the mayors or the governors cannot be present in these areas, but the guerrillas and the the narco traffic gangs and the maras, they are present. They are present. So they do not only act in narco traffic and the major system, but they also control the daily life, and they practice extortion of people and usura, and they obtain part of the gains of the local commerce and local transportation, and this is the main problem, I think, in not only in Brazilian favelas, but in all communities in which the state cannot have control. What I prepared to talk about here is more of my vision as a reporter, or as someone who's working from the ground. And I've been doing a lot of reporting in Colombia countryside, in Venezuelan countryside, and the border of Brazil with these countries. And yesterday we were talking about integration and how the government is of the different countries should be more integrated, and through Mercosur, to UNASUR, or through CELAC and other mechanisms. But the criminal organizations are working faster than the governments, and this is something that you can see in daily life in the borders of all these countries. So I think one of the main concerns that the integration should have in our talks is how to stop these criminal organizations that does not respect the borders, the country's borders. I have some examples, some real life examples. For example, in Colombia, we had in the 60s the guerrillas. They started as left-wing organizations. They wanted to seize power, but to bring socialism to the country, to Colombia and to Venezuela and to these areas. With time, the guerrillas were being seized by narco-traffic, by the army, and they became criminal organizations against the state in general. I am talking here about the FARC, Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, and the ELN. The FARC was disintegrated by a peace deal with the state in 2016, but some groups did not handle up their arms, and they prefer to talking yesterday about integrations and how the governments and the leaders should be more connected and talking about regional issues. The narco traffic and the crime organizations, they are integrating themselves faster, and so this is a real danger, and should be a major concern for all countries. I would like to do some remarks on what Comandante Farenaso said about, for example, what happened in Guatemala with Jacobo Arbenz in 1954. It's a very interesting. Yeah, it was that was a very interesting case of threat to democracy, because nowadays we talk a lot about the impact of misinformation on democracy, but on that time internet was not common, so misinformation through the social media was not a reality. But the United States State Department managed to spread in Guatemalan society and in Latin American society that Jacobo Arbenz was a real danger to democracy, that he was a socialist, that he would spread communism through whole Latin America, the same as So the misinformation.
Salvador Allende in Chile.
Salvador Allende in Chile. Yeah. So it's not only social media misinformation that is a threat against democracy in the region. It is an issue that has a lot of history. I just wanted to talk about this on the ground real issues in the borders. I think we are not looking at it with attention that we should be looking, and the governments as well. We have Ukraine as a center of attention in the news. Of course, it is a great concern, but we have a lot of criminality and violence threats very near us. Well, maybe I should. I would be more comfortable, like, answering your questions about what I've been seeing these last few years in the region. Thank you.
Before we call the other panelists, I think just to make a sum up, and very quickly because we don't have so much time, I think we have 3 examples here. One is the threatening to democracy and foreign intervention in the region. And I think Latin Americans are very used to that, having interventions from everywhere, especially from the Americans from the north. Because I always share this with the international students who come here to study with us, that we are Americans as well, right? So, and I always correct that this is not nationalism. No, don't take me wrong, I really respect everyone. But I always tell the students coming from the United States, we are also Americans. And I teach them the word estadounidense in Portuguese. You can say, I am estadounidense, eu sou estadunidense. Because we also feel we are Americans. Latin Americans as well. And as Professor Rodrigo mentioned, Latin America is so diverse. And we don't share even one language. We share many languages, many people living in diverse conditions in the entire region. And I think one of the challenges that we have to face at Latin Americas is fighting against poverty. Because when the state is not there, when you have a gap in the power of states, you have criminality, you have narco-trafficking, and you have loss of values. The problem we face in Latin America is there are places in the continent in which the state is not there. There's lack of state. One of the elements of the state is the power of the state, is the law. And that's the point. We don't have the state. And I totally agree that criminality spread all over the continent because they are faster. And the states, they don't have policy of states in Latin America, they usually have policies of governments. And policies of governments, they change all the time, every 4 or 5 years. So the union we need to promote in Latin America is the threats to democracy we need to face. Because even democracy is not perfect, and there are some people that they think that democracy, maybe it's not the correct word we need to use. Republic is what we have instead. Because we are represented by the politicians who are governing the country. And democracy is a concept from antique Greece. We don't have that anymore. Even the Greeks have slaves in the Greek democracy. So what is democracy at the end? We could have another presentation for that. Exactly. So, but now I really want to thank you very much for your remarks, for sharing your thoughts with us, remembering that the 5 continent perspectives, which is the broadened part of regional studies Latin America, is bringing all the perspectives. So you have 3 panelists here representing different thoughts, some of them aligned, some of them not, in some point yes, in some points not, and at the same time from different things. You have a commander, you have a journalist, and you have a lawyer. So that's the idea of this program. Thank you very much. Let's change the panel, please, and call the other 2 panelists for today, Professor Vinicius Rodriguez Vieira and Ambassador Jean Levy. Thank you very much. Yes, we are going to have the next presentation. Yes, please. L'ambassadeur, asseyez-vous, s'il vous plaît. And now let's move very quickly, because we are a little bit late, yes, to the next panel, which is Mercosur and the European Union, the agreement and the geopolitical implications. My goodness, this is like a more than 2 decades child that is not born yet, right? It's not born yet. I'm going to introduce very quickly Ambassador Jean Lévy. Ambassador Lévy is a French diplomat, counselor of the government of François Mitterrand, former ambassador in La Habana, Cuba, and consul general in Sao Paulo. Thank you very much, Ambassador Lévy, for being here with us today. It's a great, great pleasure. And Professor Vinicius Rodriguez Vieira is our professor, FAAP professor, and he teaches in economics and international relations. He is the author of the book, Shaping Nations and Markets, Identity, Capital, Trade, and the Populist Rage. He has a PhD in international relations in Nuffield College, University of Oxford, and a master's degree in Latin American studies from the University of California at Berkeley. So I pass the word first to Ambassador Lévy, s'il vous plaît, Ambassador. And then we are going to have Professor Vinicius' remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lourdes. I'm very happy to be here, so I will be able to give you, I hope, the point of view and the experiences of a French diplomat interested by Latin America since many years. The subject is very huge. I don't have many time, but with Professor Vinicius, last week we had the opportunity to record 3 hours of let's say, technicalities, at least 1 hour on how the Mercosur is going, the agreement between European Union and Mercosur was created. It was a very long story, 25 years, since the European Union Commissioner, Mr. Marino from Spain, launched the product. Then in this recording, we explained how the history of European Union and the history of Mercosur was a big difficulty to implement and to reach this agreement, because Europe, you know, we had the Cold War, then we had the integration of the second half of Europe, Eastern and Central Europe, into the European Union, and on the Mercosur side, you had also, and it was explained yesterday by my colleague from the Itamaraty, you had also a lot of political problem for integration, and you have, you know, go and force different political forces for accepting or not accepting free trade or not, and that was also one of the reasons why it was so a long path to reach this agreement, who was made in last December, 6th of December, between European Union and Mercosur. The second problem I should address, but I won't, is what is exactly the content of the agreement. This also is very easy to summarize. The content is, of course, an agreement on commercial, and the difference with the free trade zone is that European Union and Mercosur have a political goal in having a union a political union for customs. It's not only a free trade zone, but all the countries of the zone, whatever point you have goods entering the country, have the same tariffs. And this is something very interesting because as you have noticed lately, tariffs is going to be a big issue. The third point we are addressing with Professor Vinicius in this is how is this agreement going to be ratified inside the European Union? It's a very complicated thing because in the agreement you have commerce, you have economy, you have finance, and you have investment. And all those matters are not only in the jurisdiction of the European Union. So you will have, first, if the text of the agreement is divided in two parts, which I think with Professor Vinicius we agreed on that, you will have two different processes for ratification. Very complicated process. The first part, which is the trade part, will be taken by the Commission and bring to the Conseil Européen, which is the meeting of all the president and the chief of government. And then you will have to have an agreement, a vote, a qualified vote, very complicated one. I'm not going to explain it to you, but it's going to be difficult to have this qualified vote because you have on the 27, sorry, the Portuguese is coming back. On the 27 members, you will have to get a percentage of vote and at least 4 countries against it with another majority. But forget that. It's going to be very complicated. Then the Parliament of the European Parliament will have to vote on it. Then there is a second round of ratification, is that the 27 national parliaments will have to vote on the second part concerning the investment of the agreement between European Union and Mercosur. And if one of those 27 parliaments say no, it's finished, like in 2019. We were really near the agreement in 2019. We already had it, and then the COVID, and then the change of government, and so on. Now we have this agreement. So we have, if you are interested in it, we have 4 questions to address today concerning what Lourdes asked me about the perspective. Is this agreement going to be ratified by European Union? And of course, but this, I think Professor Vinicius is better qualified than myself to respond, is inside the Mercosur. With the pressure of the new administration in the US, are we sure that in the Mercosur itself we will not have the same problem than in the European Union? I will come back to say my opinion on that, but I want to address the second problem. The second problem is this an agreement only on trade, investment? I will read you a very simple communiqué from Itamaraty and other Brazilian minister, which is the communiqué 587, was broadcast after the signature of in December 2024, giving everything. You don't need to, I don't need to say something more on that point. And the third aspect, sorry, is how is going to be the political foreign policy of the new American administration towards Europe. We have already some, let's say, feelings, even if they are bad feelings. And how is the American administration is going, and there is quite a lot of silence, is going to act to consider Latin America? Are you going to be free to decide? Or are you going to be again, like we can see in the history with the Monroe Doctrine? I think we should more than ever discuss that. The Monroe Doctrine, it's not Marilyn Monroe, right? It's President Monroe. In 1823, in his speech to the Union, you know, every year the President of the United States made a speech of the Union, was the same in beginning of March. He said, and it was, I think, the first and more important pillar of the American foreign policy since the beginning of the United States. We don't want Europeans to come in our continent. Latin America is our backyard. I mean, we don't want Europeans to mix. It was at that time only United States and Haiti were independent countries. But there is a second pillar, and we can see it today in Europe. You are not going European mixed in our business, and us, American, we are not going to mix anymore with European affairs because we have flew from Europe. We don't want to do anything. And this is going to be for a century the pillar, as I said, of the American foreign policy, and it's going to be today, at least for the second part of the Monroe Doctrine, what's going to happen to Europe. We don't want to know anything about Europe. That's not our business anymore. You don't even can understand this position if you don't realize, and we have many examples during the last weeks, about the hate, there is not other word, the hate of the current administration towards Europe. You know, President Trump saying Europe was created just to screw us, to suck us. You can see the way they are treated Ukraine. So I come back to the first question. Do I think that this agreement or pre-agreement going to be accepted by European Union? My opinion is no, clearly not, because we will have a lot of pressure for the lobby, agricultural lobby, from France, from Poland, from Italy, from Austria, from Belgium. And we will find stupid excuses, stupid reason, because it's nothing. It's something like 1.6 problem about more importing Brazilian or Argentinian meat. It's just, you know, because we're such in a big turmoil in Europe, and that everybody is trying to get the vote from the agriculture sector. The second reason why I think it will not be possible, it's because all the far right political forces in Europe, especially in France, are fighting to get the election to get the votes of the agriculture. Third reason is because we are going to have inside Europe, European Union, and inside Mercosur, very strong winds against that. We have seen that President Milei in Argentina is trying to negotiate a free trade zone between Argentina and the United States. inside the American administration, as I said, they are not going to accept a lot of free trade with Europe, and especially if Europe is mixing with Latin America. The third thing is I wanted to read you what is the perspective, because of course it's obvious for me that this agreement, that's okay, that this agreement is not only on commerce. There is only 2 continents in the world today who are trying, they are completely alone, Europe and America and Latin America, who are alone trying to fight for democracy, for the maintenance of free trade, for trying to have, like it's the purpose of Mercosur and of European Union, to be, thank you, to be in favor of peace, of state of law, of civil liberties, of the respect of the multilateralism, and so on and so on. And those 2 continents have obviously the same interest to be together, not only economy, not only commerce, but also politics, languages, culture, history, common history, etc. So I think, and I hope I will be wrong. I think that inside Mercosur and inside European Union, and with the help of United States, everything will be done to destroy this agreement, to make it impossible, plus all the technicalities that I told you, but I'm not going into all the detail, that will make this very, very, very difficult to be accepted inside the European Union for many, many stupid reasons. But I want to say again, I hope I'm going to be wrong, and I want to finish on a very positive note by reading the communique of Itamaraty and other ministers in Brazil in December, in December 2024. I thought that yesterday my colleague from Itamaraty was going to read it, but it's a very... Yeah.
Use the microphone, please,
No,
for the guys who are online can hear you.
And I hope this is what's going to happen between our 2 continents, which I told you, thank you, are fighting, and I hope we will fight every day more and more together for not only commerce, but for democracy, for our common heritage in human rights, and so on and so on. Where is it? Of course, it's always like that when you try to find it. Excuse me.
Don't worry. I don't know what Vinicius is going to say, but it's very... the future is not very nice.
Announcement of the conclusion of the negotiation. It's coming. Okay. Published in 6th of December, okay? It was a joint print release by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of Development, Industry, Trade and Services, of Agriculture and Livestock, and of Environment and Climate Change. On December 6, the President of Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and the European Commission announced the definitive conclusion of negotiation and the partnership agreement between Mercosur and the European Union. The announcement was made on the occasion of the so-and-so, which began in Montevideo. The Mercosur and European Union Partnership Agreement, which will now undergo the preparation process for its signature, is the largest trade agreement ever concluded by Mercosur and one of the world's largest bilateral free trade areas. Mercosur and the European Union bring together nearly 718 million of people and economies that combine total almost 20 trillion of dollars. The announcement of the conclusion of negotiation culminates a process that began in 2023 when Mercosur, under Brazilian coordination, made the European Union resume bi-regional negotiations. In those 2 years, a total of 7 rounds of in-person negotiations were held between the two blocs, all of them in Brasilia. May I stretch the role of Brazil and remember that France and Brazil and France, we have a strategic partnership since 1997. In an innovative way, the agreement opens up opportunities for trade and investment without compromising the capacity to implement public policies in key areas such as health, industrial development and innovation. Under President Lula's guidance, the text of the agreement announced today ensures the preservation of space for public policy in commitments in government procurement, trade in the automobile sector, and export in crucial minerals. The agreement, and I will stretch that point, also provides mechanism to deal with possible negative impacts of unilateral measures that could affect Mercosur exports. The two blocs agreed as well on sustainable development, and we have seen, and we will see that in the COP30 in Belém do Pará in November. The two blocs agreed as well on sustainable development commitment that adopts a collaborative and balanced approach, recognizing that challenges in this area are common and must be addressed cooperatively. Well, that was 6th of December. Today, after the dismantling of all the structure of climate change in the US, we'll see what's going to happen. Nearly finished. The agreement also contributes in deepening the regional integration of Mercosur, was what we discussed yesterday, which demonstrates its potential as an efficient platform for the integration of the economies of Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay into foreign markets. Nothing about Venezuela and Bolivia. In addition, it's finished. In addition to the expected economic and trade gains, Mercosur and the European Union share, and this is something very important, I hope, for the future, common values and interests, such as, the 6th of December was well seen, such as the defense of democracy, the promotion of human rights, the defense of peace, and the commitment to sustainability. The agreement established dialogue forum that will allow greater coordination between the two regions on this and other issues. You can see the day this is going to be put under the eyes of the vice president or the president, if he has time to read, that's going to be very complicated, because it's a kind of a declaration of cooperation. Could be also a link for our two continents, Europe and Mercosur, to work together. But it's exactly the contrary, as far as I can understand, what is going to be the foreign policy of this administration, of the present American administration. But I hope I answered Lourdes' questions, even if I don't have the cards. I don't have the cards. Maybe you have the cards, but I don't have the cards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Viniz.
Okay, so thank you very much, Lourdes, for the invitation. Thank you all for coming. Those who are following our presentations at home through YouTube, thank you very much for your audience. Thank you, Ambassador Levy, with whom I had the pleasure to record part of our course on politics and economy of Latin America, discussing those different perspectives about the future of the region, particularly in the light of the EU agreement with Mercosur. It's also important to remember that when we're talking about EU-Latin American relations, the EU already has bilateral agreements with the Pacific countries here in the region. And particularly the Mexico-EU agreement is also an evidence that although the multilateral trading system may crumble after the decisions taken unilaterally by the current administration of the United States, there will still be rules to govern world trade, at least as long as those treaties that were signed in between different regions are kept in good faith. So, to begin with, I'd like to show you that Brazil 20 years ago, when it started, well, more than 20 years, we often miss the time and we often don't realize how much time it took to reach and end this agreement. The first talks in 95, the first real meeting around the meeting in 99, after Brazil suffered a major devaluation crisis, and then the second term, then President Fernando Henrique Cardoso decided to emphasize exports as a strategy to insert Brazil in global markets. His first term, the first phase of the stabilization after the Rio Plan, was much more focused on attracting foreign direct investment. Because Brazil came to be so vulnerable to international markets, to flows and outflows, inflows of money, hot money, particularly speculative capital, then a decision was taken, even in official terms, even in terms of organizational terms within the bureaucracy in the federal level. Then President Cardoso created the MEDIC, which nowadays stands for the Ministry of Development, Industry, Commerce and Services. At the time, the Ministry of Development, Industry and Trade. And here we have an alternative view, this yellow line, which this light yellow area, which excludes conveniently Cuba, would have been the FTAA, the Free Trade Area of the Americas, which both President Lula, on behalf of Brazil 20 years ago, Lula won, and then President George W. Bush of the United States, together they agreed to no longer negotiate the FTAA. Because at the time the perception was that it was not relevant for Brazil to make a partnership that would include the entire hemisphere and the United States, under the perception that it was a kind of imperialism. And time proved President Lula wrong, because Brazil, should it have had an agreement that covered the entire Americas, perhaps we could have had much more strength to fight Chinese manufacturers, which are more competitive, and that's China's merit largely. But then, of course, that reduced the space for Brazilian manufacturers in the region. And as I'm going to show you in the next slides, that also triggered Brazil's move towards the agribusiness dominance of our foreign trade. So FTAA was no longer negotiated for 2 decades, but Mercosur-EU remained as a main target for our policymakers. First, as a means of enhancing of our agricultural exports, but as particularly Asia came to be a main market for our agriculture, the agreement with the EU came to be less and less relevant. Then, in the late 2010s, then it came to be relevant again in the context of Brazil's move towards the right-wing side of politics, And then the first 6 months of President Bolsonaro's administration, they were fortunate enough to reach an agreement that nevertheless was not implemented, then leading the current administration to renegotiate the terms, particularly concerning government procurement issues and, of course, the environmental questions that are at the heart of European concerns, often not for benevolent reasons, that's needed to say, but as a means of finding ways to implement protectionist measures in order to eventually fight imports surge coming from Brazil and Argentina, particularly in agriculture. Well, very briefly, what can we therefore think about the future of this agreement considering all this context I provided you? That is, Brazil left aside this integration project that involved and was led by the United States. It was, during the last 20 years, trying to reach new markets outside the Western Hemisphere and the West in general. Now China is our major partner. Well, the fact that regional and global partnerships are not mutually excludent. As we talked yesterday in this room, there's this need for reinforcing inter-regional connections in Latin America, but at the same time, we need to reach out to new markets. And that goes even in the spirit of what was inaugurated, in my view, and according to most of the literature on the topic, during the government of President Cardoso, to make Brazil a global trader. And that was very fortunately followed, at least by the Lula administrations. The Dilma administrations, I see them more protectionist than Temer, decided to recover that through agreements, particularly bilaterally with Peru and Colombia at the regional level, and the attempts of enter OECD, which is the club of the most developed nations in the world, but without jettisoning, throwing away membership in the BRICS. And also President Bolsonaro, although he was elected with a very liberal platform, he was not able to implement that. The reasons for that, although honestly I'm very critical of his presidency, may be related to the COVID pandemic, but also some resistance on his part, who was never a true liberal. The real liberal side in his government was represented by supporters like the Minister of Economy, Paulo Guedes, who had a really liberal agenda. And it's important to say, even for the history of FAAP, the old president of, the former president of New Development Bank, former diplomat Marcos Trujillo, who was a professor in our IR course 20 years ago, and we had the pleasure to welcome him about a year ago in this institution. And he was the one who negotiated the agreement on behalf of President Bolsonaro in 2019. And so lots of these developments also are related to his competence as a former diplomat. And Brazil, as I said, came to be a global trader, but unfortunately, and I don't say that because, unlike many people who like blaming, oh, Brazil shouldn't export raw materials, I think it's fine about exporting raw materials. However, Brazil is large enough to have both strength in raw materials and in manufactured goods. But our emphasis in exporting raw materials came as to be so dependent on a single partner, China, to which, as I'm going to show you, now absorbs around 1/3 of Brazil's imports. And that would be problematic if the United States would absorb 1/3 of our exports, if Europe would absorb 1/3 of our exports. So we really need to recover this spirit of being a global trader as planned during the 90s, as we saw the place in globalization. And the Mercosur agreement seemed to be the way to find this way forward again. Here we have data from 95, that is exactly 20 years ago. Whenever I showed this to my students, they found it a little bit weird that Brazil, here the yellow part is the soybeans, which we are now very competitive, coffee, grains, and that how it changed across time. It came to be more dominant. At least how I grew up, now I'm 40 years old, I always envisioned Brazil as having strength in both manufacture and commodity exporting. But for the new generations, it's quite hard to believe that until 2005, exactly 20 years ago, Brazil was still mainly an exporter of manufactured goods. So just to see how things start to shift quite quickly, here we still have some strength in cars, which is this area here down, in purple, for instance, but then things start to change from 2005 onwards, largely because of China's demand and the lack of agreements, largely because we decided at the time, and I think respectively it was a strategic mistake, to place all our eggs in the basket of multilateralism, which is now under severe contestation, like it or not. 2010, then the dominance of the yellow and this slightly gray, perhaps brown part with minerals. Then here, 2015, the absolute domain of the yellow part. And here, 2020, we have a different division. Sorry for the changing colors, but pretty much here we have this inverted L with raw sugar, bovine meat, all things that we're very competitive, and we should remain competitive on that, exporting particularly to Asia, and of course trying to recover more added value exports. Here in terms of imports, just to show you how it also changed across time, here we have imports of high added value goods, and that only increased across time, reflecting our deindustrialization. I will move quite quickly here because it's more about imports, okay? Until we reach this level in which we have in blue here roughly 25% of our imports, particularly as I'm going to show you, coming from Asia, from China particularly, and they are related to high-end level, high-level technologies like circuits, for instance. And here I think is the most important thing that really makes it urgent for Brazil to celebrate an agreement not only with you, but like what now President Lula is doing. And again, it's not, I think, a government agenda, but a state agenda, going to Japan, going to Vietnam, and seeking new partnerships, particularly looking for emerging markets. We should also look for that for commercial purposes. And again, to avoid this dependence on a single partner, to become again a global trader. So we have here exportações, importações, sorry, oh, okay, that's functioning. And United States, if we don't consider the EU, it's the main partner. Argentina, quite meaningful. In Asia, Japan was our main partner, not China. And in blue, have the European Union. Notice what happens in year 2000. Well, United States increases as a partner. Argentina increases further. So it's the golden years of Mercosur before the Argentine debacle in the transition from the 20th to the 21st century. And then afterwards, Asia in general starts gaining momentum. So China overcomes Japan as our main destination market. United States is the leading market, excluding the EU altogether. But then what happens after the 2008 crisis? China gathers more and more share in our exports and a reduction in US exports from Brazil to the US. And that also means the decline of industry, because roughly still about 3/4, 75% of Brazilian exports to the United States, and that's quite worrisome considering Trump's strategy imposes a 25% tariff. They are of manufactured goods. So we enter, even without FTAA being celebrated, we're still relatively competitive in sending shoes and sending not so high added value goods to the American market. So that's something that may be complicated now, which again makes it more urgent to think of alternative markets as a destination for Brazil's very few manufactured goods in which we are competitive vis-a-vis Asian producers. And again, through 2015, things get reinforced, those trends, and look how tiny is now the share of the blue part, which is the European Union, the European countries, until reach this very high degree of dependence. And again, nothing against China, as they don't have nothing against the US or the EU, but a country with the size of Brazil cannot be dependent so overwhelmingly on a single market like China. We need really to recover, preferably regional markets, but until that happens, we can have in the EU a major partner. So I told you all this story to make these final considerations that combine political and economic elements. The first of all, the need to counterbalance ties with China. And in counterbalancing those ties, we also have no economic consequences. Like the Ambassador Levy said, that the agreement, in reading the statement from Itamaraty, that also comprises human rights, sustainable development. I know that those definitions are quite contentious nowadays particularly, but that's our common heritage with Europe, and we do need to have this type of emphasis, particularly to keep our democracy alive, and democracies in the region alive as well, in a world in which autocracies are gaining momentum. And when I say autocracies, I envision challenges from both the left and the right side of the political spectrum. Just think of Venezuela as an authoritarian regime. Just think of attempts of autocratization and the liberal side of politics.
Put your microphone closer to your mouth.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, that's better. And also, unlike what many analysts would argue, I do see a potential partnership with Europe as a means of fostering reindustrialization of Brazil, particularly considering that Brazil can offer, particularly not much here in São Paulo, the traditional industrial area of the country, but particularly in the northeast. It's close enough to Europe, it's close enough to Africa, which is a frontier market. So investments could go to that region. Particularly state of Ceará has very high levels of education, very well qualified workforce, thanks for their regional, state level continuous policies under several governments from different parties. They could work as a part of this kind of export platform, but also the platform from exporting not just to Africa, to Europe, but to the rest of Latin America. And that becomes more crucial considering Trump's two tariffs. We're going to see in April the 2nd what Trump calls Liberation Day. That may be actually doomsday for multilateralism, but we have to react, like Europe is reacting in articulating themselves in security. We should seek those ties with both new and traditional partners in order to overcome uncertainties about the future of multilateralism. And in case of Europe, I do see Germany and Spain as the countries that are mostly interested in taking the lead and celebrating this agreement. At least the trade part, which, as the ambassador explained very well, is in the charge of the European Parliament. And that can be done relatively quickly, I think, should there be political will. The main problem is that there are heavy protectionist pressures, and then the non-economic side, namely environment, can be a means of protectionism, of disguised protectionism, as we often say in the literature. And France is of particular concern here, particularly considering the linkages between the nationalist right, the far right, like the party of Marine Le Pen, which may be looking and is eager for the support and stronger support for the 2027 elections from farmers who think that they will be vanishing vis-a-vis competition coming from Brazil and Argentina. And also, we cannot discard also the rise of far-right movements here in the Mercosur countries. And when I say far-right, I'm really talking about a nationalist right that tends to be aligned with Trump. And I don't see alignment nowadays with Trump as reflecting the national interest, the long-term interest of any Latin American country, Brazil, Argentina included. And we also have to think here, and just to conclude, just 1 minute to wrap up, Lourdes mentioned that I published a book called Shaping Nations and Markets, in which I discuss the backlash against globalization. And the biggest problem is that those who are mostly representative of nationalism, they are also the ones who lost with globalization. And I explained this book, I'm going to show you the cover and also the QR code should you be interested about knowing more about the book and about my work, is something called identity capital. The idea that the sectors that are more nationalist in cultural terms, they tend to prevail in trade negotiations. They can be either liberalized or protectionist. And in this case of Europe, they are clearly more on the protectionist side. So should you be more interested about that, I'm happy to talk more about that in the questions and answers should we have time. If not, I just leave you my QR code with the book info, also my Blue Sky account and the LinkedIn should you want to follow more my work about those topics. So thank you very much for your attention.
Vinicius and Levi, the other panelists as well, we can open still. We have a little time for questions. So, if someone from who is here in the convention center would like to raise a question, maybe just Professor Vinicius, Ambassador Levi, Commander Robinson, Professor Rodrigo Arruda, and also Silvia Colombo, they can answer. So, if you have any question or also a comment to make, this is it. And yes, we have one.
Hello, I'm Lorenzo, student of FAAP in the first semester of International Affairs. My question is for Ambassador. Excellence, merci pour la conversation. My question is, seeing the strong ties of the BRICS in the world politics and the antagonist view of Russia and the European Union, the parliaments of the European Parliament and the parliaments indeed can see the union of the BRICS as something that they don't want to strong enough the Latin America or emergent countries, and can be like a problem to accept the new Mercosur and European Union, how can I say, the trade agreement. Do you see the BRICS as a problem or is irrelevant to the thing?
If the European Parliament could see the BRICS as a problem, yeah. Well, I don't know. Because first of all, before it goes to the European Parliament, this agreement, as I explained, has going to go to Conseil Européen, which is the meeting. Second, there is enough problem between member states of the European Union on the agreement with Mercosur. Professor Vinicius says France, but it's also very strong agricultural lobby in Italy, in Poland, in Belgium, but France is always, leading. So I don't think that BRICS will interfere. But as I said in my conclusion, the landscape is changing every day. And maybe the fact that Brazil is leading this year COP, BRICS, G20, and as I read, it was said in the communique, Brazil is the leading force in the Mercosur, not only because of its power, which is, as we say in France, Brazil is the elephant in the shop of the Mercosur. So personally, I would not give one dime on the construction of European Union if one of the country at the beginning were as big, as powerful as Brazil. I think it was possible for France because Germany was divided. So I don't think BRICS could be a problem, even if I have many thoughts about BRICS. Maybe we can explain that later. But the fact that we are living the birth of a very big new player, global player, economically and commercially. The problem is that you have in the BRICS a mix of country, which is, as an European, I have not to, but what is Brazil doing when Brazil is fighting for democracy, for inclusion, for human rights, for election, and so on and so on? You can have some question about that, but I don't think it will interfere in the signature or the ratification. But as I told you, there is so many problems, and I hope I'm wrong again, but there will be enough for fighting, and Professor Vinicius give a very good insight also of all the problems which are going to prevent the agreement to become effective. But I hope I'm wrong, really. because it's a problem of, as we said, of democracy, of common heritage, and, well, in a way of the Western civilization that we are sharing with Latin America, even if colonization was an awful moment of history, but we were sharing that with all the continent until a few weeks ago.
Thank you. Another question or comment? Yes.
Hi, I'm Luis. I'm an economist by the University of São Paulo, and I have a question to Comandante. Very interesting. You know, I love being challenged. I'm an economist. I covered Eastern Europe for the past 10 years. From Europe, I just returned to Brazil, and I would like to ask you how to distinguish. You know, I appreciate your point. You know, I mean, I'm Latin American as well. We are used to interventions, as Professor Wall said. But how to distinguish when it's a grassroots movement, like I believe, and I've seen that in Ukraine, and like it is in Georgia, and like it is in so many other countries that have been directly intervened by Russia, which is in its own way a type of imperialism, as it is the American imperialism, as many others we could call it. So how would you distinguish in your framework this type of grassroots scream for liberty, for democracy, and for accession to the European Union, which is a good way to do that, and I think that's the main issue in Ukraine, and what happened to Yanukovych, and how to distinguish that from your main framework, which is about intervention from the American lady. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I believe it's a very good question. Well, you cannot distinguish it. Everything happened as the same is created. They find a reason. So the revolution is because he using a blue shirt. Okay, so everybody say blue shirt is bad. We're gonna do a revolution. We're going to overthrow the governments. Do you remember the 20 cents in Brazil? Well, nobody speaks about 20 cents today. It was a fever. It was fake. It was unnatural. It was provoked. Ladies and gentlemen, the people that made color revolution, they have a great knowledge about human nature. They know, they study the people. They know their dreams, their hates, what they want. It's not a thing that grows in randomly, aleatory. No, it is planned. It's very well planned. It's meticulous planned. They identify some disagreement between the society in the center of the society, so they multiply that. So I have a good news for you. The formula for color revolution is fading. It's fading. It did not work in Georgia. They saw what happened in Ukraine. It did not work in Armenia. It's not working in Serbia. I believe that people is perceiving what is happening. And now, when Trump disabled the what's the name of the National Endowment for Democracy and the other... No. The organization of the government that's USA. Yes, USA. Yes, this one. Thank you. And Trump disabled the USA. So I don't know how they will make the following color revolutions. But the roadmap is always the same. It's always the same. Oh, I cited the example of the Jacob Warbens. They initiated a revolt in the fields, in the farms, and so the mob goes to the city. They make a turmoil. So the army goes and overthrow the government. It's always the same thing. It's always the same thing. In Iran, it was the same. In Ukraine, In Africa, yes, always. Thank you. Always. It's so you have to be vigilant because the color revolutions, they always use the far right. Always. A lot of movements of the far right in Ukraine, they were present in Maidan. If you see the flags, you notice a lot of Nazi movements, a lot of them. And why do they use the far right? Because they are very violent. Very violent. So they accelerate the process of a revolution. So you have to see, you have to be vigilant, and you have to believe in the democracy. That is the only way to get a better world. I know that democracy is not perfect. I know. Democracy is not a place where we go, we arrive someday. No, it's a way to ever our life, to the life of everybody. It's a way, and every way in our life has good moments and bad moments, but we cannot stop walking. As the whiskey, keep walking. So, what I have to say to you, I will say one thing for you that I believe it is the best answer. Try to initiate a revolution. You not achieve. You not have money. You not have the means. You not have the spread of communication. When they made a color revolution, they have all the means. The rebels in Maidan, they have a surgical center. They have medics. They have tractors. I show you the photographs. It's not spontaneous. Okay, you're not a team of doctors appears from nothing and say, "Wow, I want to work for you," and you have a complete hospital. Thank you. It's an offense to our intelligence. So, all I have to say for you.
You don't think that protesting is part of living in a democracy? Because, I mean, you're implying that pretty much any big protest recently in emerging countries, and that also comes from the idea that we are controlled and we can't think from ourselves, and we don't have very strong civil society and organizations like they have in any country to defend themselves, or to organize themselves for a specific interest, like we have here in Brazil. And I'm not talking about one specific protest, but several protests. I participated in several since I'm a kid, and thankfully I was born inside a democracy already. Not perfect, but I'm able to protest. I'm sorry, I think there's a view that diminishes the role of civil society and of people protest, because sometimes again, as you said, democracies are not perfect, and sometimes you are inside a process that it's already a democratic backsliding and taking away rights from voters, or even in the case of Ukraine or several countries in Eastern Europe, the stuffing of ballots, sponsored by Russia, by the way, that happens, besides the control of the media or the absence of media, and so on and so forth. And sometimes protesting is the only way to do that. I understand your point, but I think it's very simplistic and disrespectful to how diverse the world is, and countries are, and situations are, to compare. And I wish you stood in the Latin American analysis, because I was really interested to, get your analysis from the 50s, the 60s, and 70s about what happened to our neck of the woods, But to compare that to what happened in Eastern Europe, I think it is a bit of a stretch. I'm sorry, and a bit disrespectful as well.
What I have to say to you is the following: it's a right to the societies to make a protest. It's a right. It's a right of yours to go to the streets with a plug and so. But the color revolution, it's a pandemic movement. There's money in this, okay? And there is a hidden objective. You saw in Ukraine what was the objective. Biolabs and natural research and so. But it's a choice of each one. Everyone makes the choice. If you believe that you're making the right things, go ahead. It's all I can say for you. But I don't believe. When I say money, money through the movement, I know someone is paying this. And these people doesn't have the same objectives than myself. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both. But we go to, we have to finish, and we go to Ambassador Levy, who asked to speak, and then we finish with you, Rodrigo. We need to finish. It's time to finish. Okay.
It was a question for Lourdes. It was a question for Professor Arruda that I wanted to address to him.
Okay.
How? Okay. Okay, but that was for him, the question. So.
It's very, very short because of our time, but for our economic student, when I studied about the protests and the people, the mass movements, we never have so much important movements spontaneous. What we need to look for is who organized the movements and what's the interest for the groups to organize movements. If we talk French Revolution, Russian Revolution, and all the colored revolutions, looks like, in a first look, spontaneous and to treat about people demands, organic people people demands. But if we go further, we will see that who financed the movements, who organized the protests. It's not spontaneous. It's not an organization to, in fact, want the better life for the people. No, they have personal, they have interests, foreign or particular interests. And they use the people in the most part of the time to get your own goals. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, but sometimes the parties are also like the pro-Russia parties and everything. But
yes.
And I'm not a student by them, I'm graduated.
But, you know, here all these perspectives are welcome. So the debate in peace and constructive debates is always what we are looking for, right? So we finish with you, Ambassador. And
thank you. If I may, Lourdes, I would like to address a question to Professor Rodrigo Arruda. Because it's the problem of culture of crime is not anymore, if even it was only a problem of Latin America, but it's a problem for the whole world, inclusive your North country's neighbor, but it's becoming a big problem in Europe too, and especially in my country, where maybe you've seen that a former president was charged yesterday and was maybe will be 7 years in jail, which is a real earthquake. So my question is to Professor Arruda is, what can European Union and Mercosur do together against this culture of crime, which unhappily is not in the communique I read at the beginning? Because I think it's a very, very important problem.
Well, thank you for the question, Ambassador. And it's really a very important problem for nowadays. And I thought we have 2 or maybe 3 fronts to fight against some problems to solve these questions. First of all, like Lourdes told us after my speech, I just registered, yes, the people who live in communities and favelas are victims of the criminal organizations. They don't belong to them, but they are suffocated by them. Well, and about the economic point, the fight against poverty, Teacher Lourdes told us as well. It's a point, it's one part of in my opinion, it's one part of the problem we can solve. But not improving the minimum wage, because here in Brazil, for example, we have President Lula and President Bolsonaro and 2 different almost opposite spectrums, but the economic policies is almost the same. And if we really want to fight against poverty, what we will need to improve is our power of the power of our currency, the power of purchase of our currency. Not even improve the minimum wage or public benefits or this kind of stuff, social programs. We need to create a strong economic policy to improve our currency. And if we really improve our currency, we will have more power of purchase for the part of the people. And then the poverty will be down. We will be reduced at least. And the other two ways, the other two things we need to fight against, it's the criminal organization, it's security and or safety politicians. We don't need to escape from that. We will need to do it, but we will need to improve our culture programs as well. In Europe Union, we have the problem of immigration, right? Like something like the United States. Mr. Trump, the United President, want to deport most part of the immigrants. And Europe, we have a similar problem. For example, France, your country, we have a great community of Muslims. And it's not a problem as well. But if we don't integrate these people to the community, if they do not feel French, like the who were born and live in France, it will be a segregation problem. And these gaps of the state in these communities could improve the criminal organizations to control some communities and use these communities for our own interests. So I guess we have three things to do. Improve our power of the currencies. We need to fight against the criminal organizations, maybe using the Interpol and the Latin America Federal Police Organization too, and improve our culture. Turn back to the culture of the past and recruiting former teachers, researchers, and etc., if it's necessary, to create a new policy of culture and education. I guess it's the three parts of we need to fight to, I don't know, solve, but reduce the problem.
Thank you very much. So we are going to finish. Before I finish, I must say that culture is not a monolith. Culture changes all the time, and we don't have a culture as it was at the very beginning. What we have is transculturality. And we have ages in time, ages in history, and it's impossible, Professor Arruda, to come back to the origins because we go we go forward, right? But yes, I understand what you pointed out, which is recovering some values, important values, right? Well, we finished for today. Thank you very much for the wonderful debate. I think we created a real democratic debate here. I really appreciate you were here today with us. For those who are online, thank you very much, and we see you tomorrow. We see you tomorrow. You're invited to come tomorrow, starting from 2 p.m. Professor Edson, can you say something that is to happen tomorrow so we finish very quickly, please? Please come here so the camera can focus on you, and the other colleagues here on the convention center can see you. This is Professor Edson Canella. When I have something to write, I'm very confident on the mastery that Professor Canella has in languages. And I love that because I also love languages. So Professor Canella tomorrow is going to be in one of the panels together also with Silvia. And he's going to tell us what's going to happen.
Okay, good afternoon. Okay, it's not that way as Lourdes said. Okay, I like Portuguese and English. But,
no, he corrects wonderfully.
I think she exaggerates a little bit. Anyway, tomorrow we are going to have Professor Jorge Miguel, who is a person that I really believe he's very, very good at literature and Professor Igor, and I'm going to mediate the debate, okay? We are going to talk about literature and the reflection, or the reflect that literature relies or has on Latin America, okay? Professor Jorge Miguel will recite, let's say, some verses from Cruz e Souza, Augusto dos Anjos, and of course, Navio Negreiro from Castro Alves, that it has everything to do with Latin America. And Professor Igor will tell us about a poem from Uruguay. He's very smart. I think he chose the poem.
The most wonderful writers.
Oh, yes,
Uruguay
yes.
Share with the world.
Yes, he took advantage of two things. Benedetto is really a great
It is
poet.
if you haven't read
And he is Uruguayan. Lourdes is Uruguayan, okay? That's what we are going to have tomorrow. And then, Lourdes, you can talk something about the movie and about the discussion that we are going to have then.
The best series and Latin American movies you must watch to get to know Latin American culture, people, and the region. And we finish with the wonderful movie La Historia Oficial, who won the Oscar of the best international movie many, many years ago. And now you know that the Brazilian movie, Ainda Estou Aqui, I'm Still Here, won the Oscar. So we were going to make the comparison before with wonderful people, Silvia Colombo and Luis Toledo, and finishing with the movie with popcorn and coffee break and
For sure.
just to have fun.
Everything that we have the right to let you. Okay?
So guys, bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.